What if your lack of self trust is the very thing holding you back from launching or growing the business podcast life of your dreams? Well, in this episode, I'm joined by Dawn Ledet, the host of the Self Trust Solution podcast, to explore the connection between self trust, personal growth, and podcast success. A little bit more about Dawn before we dive in. Dawn shares how her own wake up call led to a life dedicated to helping others build self trust and how that translates directly to showing up, staying consistent, and creating content that truly connects. If you've been sitting on a podcast idea for months or years, or struggling with confidence around your next move, this episode is absolutely going to help you reframe your mindset and give you the tools to take bold, aligned action. Welcome to the Podcast Cafe, where we're serving up everything you need to know about podcasting, from tips, stories, and strategies for podcasters from podcasters. I'm your host, Haley Hayhurst, the founder of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency helping business owners, creatives, and thought leaders launch and grow their shows. Whether you're just starting out or want to take your podcast to the next level, this is the place for you. Each week, we'll dive into practical tips, actionable strategies, and of course, stories from other podcasters so that you can build up a podcast that you love and that works for your business. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Welcome to the Podcast Cafe. Hey, Dawn, welcome to the Podcast Cafe. I am so excited to have you in here.
It is. I'm just so excited to be here. I was looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for having me. I look forward to what we are able to bring to your listeners today.
Yes, it's going to be a good one. But before we get started, I have a very important question for you. What is your go-to coffee order?
Oh, a latte with almond milk,
Mm,
always.
yep. Yep. I love that. I love that. Since we're in the podcast cafe, we have to know, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's iced and sometimes it's hot.
Yep.
No real preference.
I love that. Okay, well, I'm excited to talk about your podcast because it's all about self-trust. So, why don't you tell us more about why you started your show, The Self-Trust Solution?
Yes. Well, like many of us who identify a challenge, it starts with us. And I had this wake up moment one day. I was an executive in the hospitality industry for a couple of decades, and I was overworking and underliving and all the things that we hear about. And I thought I had this brilliant idea that I was going to sell my car. And I actually did this to force me to walk 2 miles to and from work
Mm.
because that would make me go to work at a normal time and leave work at a normal time. And it would have me moving my body instead of being tied to a desk. And one of those days where I was feeling really proud of how smart I was on one of those walks. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. Why am I having to force myself to show up for myself in the way that I want to? And it was like an avalanche of a lifetime of evidence of how seriously lacking in self-trust I was. It just came flooding in. And that was the beginning of recognizing the power of self-trust, how the lack of self-trust affects us. And it became a passion. And I had to start helping others as I worked on myself and then started helping others do it. I just wanted more people to know about it because we can walk around. I mean, I was very successful. You can do lots of things with a lack of self trust, it turns out. But with it, everything changes.
That is so interesting. I see that a lot in the online space too, where people will start working with clients and they feel like they have to over deliver to have their clients happy, or if they feel like they're under delivering, they just freak out, or they're not able to show up online or show up in their podcast. They have an idea for a show, but they don't act on it because they're like, who would listen to me? Or they don't trust themselves enough to continue with it and be consistent with it.
Absolutely. And you said something so key there. It's those questions like, who would listen to me? Our inner dialogue is a key component in building self trust. And look, I'm not a proponent of rainbow and daisy thoughts because they don't work, honestly, if you're not there. If you don't believe everyone's going to listen to you, telling yourself that is actually like lying to yourself
Mhm.
because you don't believe it and then you're trying to convince yourself. It actually creates more of a fracture in your relationship with yourself instead of creating more connection. And so I never want someone to change necessarily their inner dialogue. I want them to change their relationship to it so that
Yeah.
it's not an automatic shutdown when a question like that comes up. It's not one that starts to feed the insecurities we have that come with doing new things. It becomes this invitation to check in with ourselves, to tune
Yeah.
in and see both sides of the story. Like, yes, no one could listen, and I could help thousands of people. And then there's this whole in between. There's between one and 1,000 people that you could help. And is it worth it for you to do that? And if the answer is yes at any level, why not?
Mm, yes. So what made you want to start your show? Was it to reach more people?
Absolutely. Just to spread this, it really is a mission of mine to connect people to their self trust because of what it has done for myself and hundreds of people that I've worked with. And I will tell you, I fell victim to that same kind of mindset in the beginning. I had an idea for three separate podcasts, like
Mm.
mapped them out, had episodes prepared. And at some point, the discomfort of doing it doesn't outweigh the discomfort of not doing it. And that's part of another piece of what I've noticed about growing in self trust is we don't have to wait for that comfort tolerance necessarily to increase. We can actually increase our capacity for discomfort before. We don't have to keep putting things off. But absolutely, we want to know that doing is uncomfortable and not doing is uncomfortable. And so we're just going to pick the discomfort that actually grows us.
Okay. I love that. And I know that you work with a lot of people to help them stop doing this like self-doubt and help them really trusting themselves. What when you were going through this process, what made you, push yourself forward?
It was when I realized that the pushing and the pulling was the problem. And I started connecting and creating a better relationship with myself so that when I was doubting, or when I was fearful, or when I just was uncertain, because that's where a lot of our discomfort comes from, right? When we're starting new things. Then instead of trying to push myself, which is like using willpower, and willpower is finite, it just doesn't last. And so I created ways to support myself forward instead of pushing myself forward. And that
Mm.
was a huge turning point because when we realize that everything we want is on the other side of discomfort, we can start working with our need for comfort. It's not a problem that we want comfort, but if our go to habits of comfort pull us away from what we want, which they do, think, going to binge shows on Netflix, scrolling on social media. Sometimes people do amazing things like going to work out, walking their dogs in the park. Well, our comfort habits aren't wrong. It's just if they're not supporting you and moving forward to what you want, then we want to create some that are. And so
Yeah.
I teach a comfort plan so that we can anticipate and allow the discomfort because it's going to show up. And if we know it's coming, we're less likely to react to it in a way that says, oh, I should stop, or oh, this won't work for me, or oh, no one will listen, because that's when those thoughts come in.
Yeah. So when it comes to, a lot of my clients want to start podcasts because they want more marketing assets. They want to use it to reach more people and get their message out there. And podcasting, as you know, is great for that because you get to tap into while people are maybe doing their comfort walks or comfort scrolls or cleaning or whatever it is, they can be listening to you and you can be empowering them whether you know it or not. So tell me more about self-trust from, like, a podcast standpoint. like what can listeners do if maybe they aren't being consistent with their podcast, or maybe they haven't started their podcast yet. They have the idea like you had, but they, haven't taken action on it. What are some things that they can do to start building that trust within themselves to show up on a podcast?
Yeah, it really is data helps so much.
Mm,
When we give ourselves clear data of like, this is what it's going to take to do this. This is my best guess. We're not going to know all the answers in the beginning. And then taking steps one at a time towards it. Now, this means what a lot of people get wrong about this is they want to rush and try and do a ton of things in a short amount of time. And it doesn't work with their life. It doesn't work with their discomfort tolerance yet. They haven't increased that capacity for discomfort. And so they have to develop, I call it, it's like a success date strategy where we actually map out what is it going to take? How much time can I actually give to it that I want to give to it each week?
mhm.
And then the end of that is your deadline. So you're not picking these short term, doesn't work with your life, doesn't work with your energy level timelines where we're setting ourselves up for failure. We're actually mapping out the journey, mapping out the plan from a place of self care and self trust. Because the more you act on those things, those steps that you put into place that work with you, momentum builds. And if
Yeah.
you celebrate along the way, each step that you do, your people think celebration is like this nice to have, like we can celebrate at the end, but it's actually a strategic checkpoint that you use throughout your development of your podcast so that you are giving yourself what's working, the data of what's working, me following through, what's not working. I don't give myself enough time. That time block wasn't big enough for that particular step. It's not a checkpoint to judge yourself. You just didn't know before how long it was going to take. So you took your best guess, you gave it a try. It didn't work in that timeline. It doesn't make you wrong, it makes adjustments necessary to the timeline.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. I have a master class all about tracking your data for your podcast because so important to know. w- it's nice to just reassure yourself that not only people are listening, but they're also enjoying what you're putting out. And that way you
Mhm.
can make those data driven decisions. But to your point of, do you give yourself enough time to actually create the content that you want? you know, a lot of people will either do guest episodes or solo episodes. Some will do both. But I know this is different from you because you did all solo episodes up until, what was that, episode 100?
Until episode 100, yes. And now I
Okay.
do every other is a guest episode. Every now and then there'll be back-to-back episodes, but
Yeah.
mostly.
Okay, well, I want to dive into this because I think that is the number one question I get from podcasters is, how will I come up with enough topics?
Mhm.
I get that all the time. How do you come up with enough topics to do 100 solo episodes?
I can't come up with not a, like there's just so much. And
Yeah.
I think for anyone that's questioning that, they're not actually accessing their inner wisdom, their experience, all the things they're doing. They're probably discounting it. That's where the self trust piece comes in. And so I invite you to just take a moment and really brainstorm, let it spill out, walk away from it, and then come back with new ideas. Let it really bubble up to the top. All your experience in whatever you're talking about, all the things you see when you go to the grocery store that actually feeds into that. Your sister, your cousin, your aunt, from your own life, all of it matters. And you have a lot more experience and knowledge and wisdom. But when we're stuck in what I call the lobby noise of our mind, which is where it's everyone else's voices and all those experts you follow, and they're amazing and they're like, 1,000 steps ahead of you, but you're comparing yourself to them.
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
all of that that shuts down your inner wisdom. And so I always invite people to walk through that door. we're going to live in the lobby a lot of the time. It's not a problem, but there is a door on the other side, and through it is your intuition and your wisdom. And you have to spend some time there because there's a lot of fruit to be gathered.
That's powerful. That is really powerful. I There's so many podcasts out there, right? And there's so many people on social media who are telling you to do one thing and then you listen to another show and they're telling you to do something else. I keep getting ads on Instagram for this woman who's like, "Stop giving away free stuff. It's making your audience want free stuff for you." And then I love Alex Hermosi and his whole thing is like, "Give everything away for free." And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it's confusing. I've never heard that phrase lobby noise, and I'm gonna start you like thinking of it that way because it
Mhm.
is easy to take all these different ideas and just not do anything with it because you're
Mhm.
so overwhelmed. So probably taking that action is an act of self-trust, is it not?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And using that data, like the lobby noise has some good stuff in there. It's just when we're hearing it as a cacophony of confusion and we use it to feed our insecurities, it becomes a problem. But if you're hearing from Alex to give everything away and you're hearing from someone else that says, you know, don't give anything away, you're, creating more audience of people who just want free things. We have a moment that we get to look at both and say, what do I like about each of these? What do I not like about each of these? What if I put them together, layered them on top of each other? What do I think is the next best thing that would work for me that I want to try, experiment with? If we can remember it's all an experiment, we create
Yeah.
that momentum and give ourselves an opportunity to get enough data to grow our belief that we can have always enough topics, that we're never going to run out of topics.
Mm. I like to think of podcasting as a game. It's like one of these marketing tools that you just get to play with and test new things out. I think podcasting is a great place to test new things out that maybe you can then bring over to social media because your audience wants to listen to you talk about whatever it is that you're talking about, as long as you have a theme and you're not just pulling out random topics. But I do think that podcasting can just be a place where you can just test and play with it and see what resonates with your audience and see what they care most about.
Totally. I think that's true of almost everything. We can
Yeah.
take ourselves so serious in the process so seriously because there are some true metrics that we're trying to achieve financially, personally, but we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. It becomes this heavy burden on us instead of this really fun game that we get to play while helping other people.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. So, when you're coming up with your podcast topics and you step out of the lobby and
Hmm.
really listen to yourself, what are some practices that you do? Do you write down a bunch of ideas that you have? Do you plan out your episodes months in advance? Like, what is your technical side of it look like?
Yes. I am a big planner. I'm a big batcher. So like one episode 113 dropped today. I have 100 and up to 125 or more recorded already and ready to roll. They're scheduled. How I do it is I am very clear on my framework and what I do. So I am focused on growing your self-trust so that you can achieve the goals you want, big goals. And I believe it only takes three things to achieve anything, and that's to make decisions, follow through, and have your own back. And then off of that, I've created frameworks from being able. So that always serves as the anchor for my content. So whether it's actual teaching on different ways of using decisions, big decisions, you know, daily decisions, or if it's follow through and am I, balancing my time correctly, all of that, those different aspects of those three things. So I do recommend like being anchored in your core business, like what the idea about what your concept is, what your tools are, what your intellectual property is. That always can help. And then always being on the lookout, like I mentioned earlier, of like your aunt, the person at the grocery store. when you go to, the Geek Squad at the store, whatever it is, be on the lookout for what ties into what you do. And it doesn't have to be a direct correlation, but it can inspire something in you. So if you're always open to learning instead of shutting yourself down, telling yourself no one's going to listen and no one cares,
Yep.
then you can recognize things like that. And I always just keep a little, like a notes in my phone that I can just type in some concepts or some ideas, or like, oh, someone said that just now. Like I could create a whole episode off of that.
You can really get inspiration from anywhere. And even with, your podcast has a niche topic, self-trust. But there are so many angles of your own life to explore, of other people's lives. You've done more than 6,000 coaching sessions. Each of those you've worked with clients to get their perspectives from. And I just think that people also worry about niching down because of the self-trust aspect of how am I going to find the content that matters that people want to listen to. You can talk about anything for forever. There's so many angles, like you're saying.
Yes. And I mean, there's that idea that if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. So deciding that, like, if you're going to, maybe you're niching down, like you have a person, it's not actually a concept or topic, it's just like a person. And then you
Mhm.
are always talking to that person and the different things that you think are going on in their life. It's definitely niching down is something I coach people on quite a bit, as I work mostly with entrepreneurs. And it's an indulgent distraction.
Okay, tell us more. Tell us
I
more.
know that sounds, and it sounds a little harsh, and I don't mean it to be. It's just how our brain works. Like when something's uncomfortable, if we don't normalize that discomfort, like of course it's uncomfortable. I'm doing something amazing. Like I'm about to step into something really cool. If we don't normalize that discomfort, our brain will start to build a case for why it's a problem. And it's really easy to grab for the niche drama. It just is. It's just another piece of, basically the underlying question is, I don't know if this will work. I don't know if I can do this. I don't
Mm.
know if I can handle this, whether it's the success of it they're fearing or the lack of success of it.
Okay, I feel like that'll really like hit a lot of people. I feel like that will, I mean, because you're so right. I mean, if you can't figure out what the topic is going to be, it might be deeper of like you don't know if you're worthy enough to talk about it, or you don't know if you should even be the one to have a microphone or
Mhm.
whatever it is. That's really interesting. So niching, what are some other places that you see this pop up?
Pricing,
Mm-hmm.
lots in pricing. It'll come up in new offers. It's
Mm.
like if you want to switch, or even, oh, when people have amazing offers that they have proof of concept, it's actually working, they're making money, and then they get bored with it, so they want to change.
Yep.
And it's like,
Yep.
whoa, what
Yeah.
if you find your excitement elsewhere and keep serving your people who are obviously interested? Or how about you create excitement or decide that excitement's not necessary? There's so many options for coaching there, but that is often where it shows up. It's
That's
always
interesting.
in some piece of making a decision, following through, or how you're using the data against yourself of what you've already created or not created, and how you're judging it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like this conversation is going to help a lot of podcasters and entrepreneurs, which is, who's mostly listening to the show, really get past those brain obstacles that we put up for ourselves. I think
Yeah.
that most of the time we're not even aware of them. Or maybe, I talk to a lot of people who they're like, I've had this idea for a podcast for the last 2 or 3 years. And yeah, it probably is self-trust. So I'm going to definitely send them this episode when that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy for us just to stay in our comfort zone or stay away from what makes us uncomfortable, just even though if we know it's a good idea, it's easy just to avoid it.
It's easier, but it's not actually more comfortable because
Mm.
that podcast idea has been looming over her head for 3 years.
Yep.
There's
Right.
nothing comfortable about that. There's nothing comfortable about knowing you want something and not giving it to yourself.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I think that's so important of reminding yourself it's going to be uncomfortable either way. Do I prefer the comfort of staying the same, or do I prefer the discomfort of staying the same, or the discomfort of growth and giving myself a chance, betting on myself? That's one that I bring up often is like, I love betting on myself. And
Mhm.
it's so different than what my inner dialogue used to tell me all the time, which some of your listeners will recognize this. It seems so innocuous. It's like, what's wrong with me? And it could be like I drop a pin and I'm like, oh, what's wrong with me? Sounds like not that big of a deal, right? Or to some people, it probably sounds awful. And to some people, they're like, oh, yeah, I do that all the time. It's not that big of a deal. But the truth is, confirmation bias is real in our brain. And if
Mhm.
we don't answer that, it goes to look for all the things that are wrong with us. And the answer is nothing. But when we don't give it an answer, it will go and it will bring you the podcast idea you had 3 years ago that you never acted on. It's going to bring you when you decided to go vegan and it lasted 2 days. It's going to remind you all the times that you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And then it starts predicting the future and telling you that you never will. And so we have to be in touch with that inner dialogue. And again, we don't need to go into affirmations and pep talks. If those work for you, great. We just need to remind ourselves that one, we don't have to believe everything we think. And two, it could be an invitation. I like to think of it as an invitation to either affirm myself, my path, my goal, or an invitation to see a different perspective. So, what's wrong with me? Even that question, if I want to use it as an invitation to affirm myself, my path, my goal, it's like absolutely nothing. I'm like
Mm.
helping people. I'm helping so many people. If I want to use it as a different perspective, like what's wrong with me? What do I need right now? Like, what am I needing right now that I'm not giving myself? It just changes that
Wow.
confirmation bias and what your brain goes to look to prove.
Wow. I absolutely love that. I'm learning so much right now. I feel like there's so many things in my head where, with business or even with life, I want to do stuff, but then I don't do it or I have a long to-do list. And I know this is common for a lot of people, but if I don't finish my to-do list, it kind of brings up those feelings of, "Ugh, I'll never finish this," or, "Ugh," frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And just doing it, it sounds like will build that self-trust within yourself that you can then do other things that you want to do.
Yeah, or just answer that. Like, I'll never finish this. Is
Do
that
I even
true?
need to do it?
Like, do
Yeah.
I even need to do it, or is that true? Will I just do it another time?
Mhm.
Am I being a little too like one all or nothing thinking right now? What's the in between? Okay, I'm just not going to finish it today.
Right. Right.
It matters because then you can turn, okay, what did I get done today? And that is like shifting yourself from what I'm not doing to all the things I have accomplished.
Mm.
And that's
That's a
powerful.
that is powerful. You are the creator of the Self-Trust Lab. Tell us more about that and how you work with your clients.
Yeah. So in the Self Trust Lab, we have 6 core frameworks that are all geared towards setting goals and building self trust through the process of achieving them. It's my favorite thing. It's like self trust affects our whole lives,
Yeah.
but being able to use it to focus on those 3 skills of making decisions, following through, and having your own back, when we do those things fueled by self trust, it's your success is inevitable. And so the core frameworks touch on everything from setting the goals to success dates, doing a new way to set timelines for ourselves, creating comfort plans for ourselves. There's an I'm so impressed list. I recommend everyone start one. You don't need my program to do that, though you're welcome to come in. Um, it's so powerful to just always keep a running tally of all the most impressive things you do, including not yelling at the woman at the grocery store. It doesn't have to be big things. Put them all in there. But so the Self Trust Lab is that core. It really is all about walking you through, and it's lifetime access, but it also comes with the most powerful piece, which is 12 weeks of private, dedicated coaching to really solidify and start to grow that self trust. And so that you are following the process, making sure that you are growing your self trust, turning data evaluations into drama punishment, and moving forward in a way that supports you instead of setting yourself up for failure.
I'll definitely put the link in the show notes to the Self Trust Lab.
Great.
I love hosting these podcast episodes because I just get to ask the questions that I'm curious about. And I know that the audience, I went to an event yesterday and they were doing this presentation, and one person had a million questions and no one else asked questions. And everyone was like, that was nice. Like, I'm so glad that she was the one asking because that was what I was wondering too, but I was never going to ask. And
I
so,
love that.
I think that's one of those things with podcasting. Like, as the host, just ask what you're curious about because that's what the audience is curious about too.
Yeah, absolutely. For
Yeah.
sure.
So I have a few questions for you about your, podcast listening habits and interests and all of that. So I'm curious, do you remember the first podcast that you listened to or the first one that left an impact on you?
The first podcast I listened to was Crime Junkie.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is the best thing ever. Not just like the actual, I mean, it's a great show, of course, but just the idea of being able to listen and do whatever you're doing. Go for a walk, go for a run, go for a bike ride, do the dishes. It was a I fell in love with the format of podcasting from the
Yeah.
very first episode I listened to.
Yeah. I love that. Do you have podcasts that you recommend everyone listen to now?
I I actually don't, and let me tell you why. You may not want to put this on. But so, through my self-trust journey, I went on a consumption fast that was
Mm,
supposed to last 3 months, and it lasted 3 years. And so until this year, I had not listened to a podcast or read like a self-help book or
mhm.
like all the things that I was filling my brain with at all over the last three years.
I love that. I'm gonna leave this in because this is something I'm very passionate about too. I obviously listen to my clients' episodes every week and they are incredible podcasters. I learn a lot from them. But in my free time, I don't listen to a ton of other shows other than like comedy or the occasional Diary of a CEO and Alex Hermosi, like podcasts like that. But in my other show, Employee to Boss, the last question I ask all my guests is to give 3 action steps based on the conversation for the audience to then go and do.
Hmm.
Because I talk to people who are like, I listen to podcasts 8 hours a day. And I'm like, that's incredible. What are you learning? I feel like I have always been a person to learn by taking action, very hands-on, and that's what I want from all of my listeners. So even from this
Mhm.
episode, like I'm going to ask you, what should the audience do next, right? I think that every time someone listens to an episode, unless it's just for pure entertainment, like you should be doing at least one thing that you learned.
Absolutely. We can get into that overconsumption. And it's amazing. And we think we're doing good things because learning is great. You're not wrong about that. But if it's keeping you from moving forward and actually doing what you want, why you want to listen to those podcasts, if
Mhm.
you're not taking action on what you're learning, it's
Yeah,
just another way to keep yourself safe.
it is. And as a host, remember that too, because you're going to want to give your audience action steps to take.
Mm.
I know that people's pet peeves in the podcast world is when you listen to an episode and you're like, I don't know if I learned anything, right? So I know with your episodes, you keep them shorter but actionable.
Absolutely. My episode is very formatted. So particularly my solo, but it doesn't matter whether it's solo or guest, there will always be, and at the end I say, what will you take away from today's episode? here's what I offer you, or were my favorite takeaways from the guest. And I give you 3, 4, maybe 5 takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all related because the episode is about a particular topic. So I think it's so important. But that's important too for self-trust, as that's what I'm teaching people is to build self-trust, which means to give yourself some information, but don't turn it into a hideout.
Yeah.
Put it into action. And so that's why I keep it was very intentional. The episodes are very short and they always have takeaways.
I love that. I love that. So 2 more questions. I'm curious, what is the best thing that you've learned about yourself through the podcasting process? Like, what's the most surprising thing you've learned?
I am incredibly proud of my ability to just try and to do it poorly. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really good at doing it poorly just to get it started because I'll learn from it. I get no data from trying to do it perfectly, and that would have been my old way. And just doing it imperfectly just to get the data that I need to improve it to keep growing is probably like my most favorite skill that if you want to call it a skill that I've developed through building this unshakable self-trust. And it's made a huge difference because through it, I've been able to write a book, put together 6 core frameworks within a program that's helped so many people. I have, an executive coaching program that I work with higher level C-suite. And I've been able to do all of that in just a few years.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and I know that the audience has taken a lot away from this too. So I'm curious, what should they do next? What is your best piece of advice for them to move forward after this episode is over?
Yeah, I really invite them to start considering that concept of the lobby noise versus the interior room and notice the difference between the two without judgment. Just recognize that when you're spending time in the lobby noise, and know that you can walk through that door. If you're a visual person, actually visualizing walking through that door can be really helpful. Just to give yourself, it can start with 5 minutes a day of just spending time in silence in that inner room so you can access your wisdom and your intuition. And in the beginning, it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. You're creating relationship, and building relationship takes time. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it be slow. It's worth it either way.
Where can people find you, Dawn?
You can find me at theselftrustcoach.com. And everything is there. It's a great place to go. There's this really, if your audience, anyone out there is realizing how their inner dialogue or their self-trust could use a boost, I have this great 7-day self-trust boost series. It's a simple, quick email series that will just start reconnecting you to the self-trust you already have and helping you grow it along the way.
Amazing. All the links will be in the show notes, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me in the Podcast Cafe. I hope you're leaving with fresh ideas and inspiration to take your podcast to the next level. Remember, podcasting is a journey, and you don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help you every step of the way. Let's connect. Be sure you follow me on Instagram at Espresso Podcast Production, or visit espressopodcastproduction.com for more tips, resources, and behind-the-scenes insights. I'd love to hear about your podcasting journey. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps more podcasters just like you find the show. Until next time, grab your coffee, keep creating, and I'll see you back here in the Podcast Cafe.